Everyone pretends immigration is complicated. It's not complicated. It's just uncomfortable.
Horrible invasion that's happening to Europe, many countries in Europe. Some people, some leaders have not let it happen. And they're not getting the proper credit they should. I could name them to you right now, but I'm not going to embarrass the other ones. But stop. This immigration is killing Europe.
We are told it's about compassion or diversity or helping people. That's the marketing ploy. It's actually about GDP going up and padding the demographics so that their system doesn't fall. If this was about becoming an American, there would be some actual friction, like language requirements or cultural expectations, a clear line between being a guest and being a citizen. Instead, it's frictionless, and that's how you can really tell that it's not about becoming a citizen of the nation you're going to. We build a system where the goal isn't joining a nation, it's accessing a machine. Work, benefits, remittances, no shared fate, no long-term stake. The country becomes a tool, not a home, because they have a home that they can go back to and they consider better than here. That's why people bring up the camp of the saints, not because it is polite and perfect, but because it describes something modern people are trained not to talk about: collapse and how people are paralyzed by our morality. In the book, no one storms the gates, no army marches in. The system fails because the people in charge cannot say no, not legally, not morally, not emotionally. They're trapped by their own self-image of empathy. They want to be seen as good more than they want to be effective for their people. So they stall, they issue statements, they outsource responsibility, they shame anyone who notices the obvious trade-offs, and the machine keeps running. That part isn't fiction, that's just how systems work. Modern immigration follows the same logic or lack thereof. There is no serious discussion on limits, capacity, or cohesion. Those are considered immoral questions. Only intentions matter. Outcomes are an afterthought. People who raise concerns aren't debated, they're demonized, called fearful, an ism, and a phobia. Stupid, because once you turn a policy into a moral identity test, you don't have to defend it anymore. If you just punish people that don't agree with you, there's no conversation. And meanwhile, reality keeps doing what it always does. When you bring in large numbers of people without requiring assimilation, you don't get unity, you get fragmentation. Parallel communities, separate languages, separate values, separate loyalties. It's like when you bring an invasive species into a pond. The native species in that pond doesn't know how to survive and adapt to what's going on. And that's not diversity. That's balkanization with better PR. A shared culture isn't optional. That's the fucking glue that holds it together. Without it, you're not a country. You're an economic zone with a flag. People don't sacrifice for zones. They extract from them, which is exactly what happens. Money comes in, money goes out, remittances flow overseas. The wealth generated by the system doesn't stay in the communities, bearing the cost. Schools strain, housing tightens, wages flatten, social trust goes away. And then you're told this is good for you. The elites love this argument. Of course they do. They don't live near it. They don't have any of the pressure around them. Their neighborhoods don't change. Their kids don't compete in the same schools or job markets. Immigration happens somewhere else for them. They experience immigration as a statistic, as a line on a chart, as a talking point at a conference. They don't see nations as homes. They see them as platforms, interchangeable. If one destabilizes, there's another one. they can go somewhere else. And that's why they love being globalist. That's why they push globalization. That's the part people are finally starting to notice. The ruling class does not share the same risks as the public. When things are unstable, they don't pay the price. They leave. They insulate themselves. They hire security. They move assets. They retreat behind the gates and credentials. Everyone else is told to adjust. In the camp of the saints, the real failure isn't invasion. It's the leaders being so afraid of being judged as immoral that it refuses to act at all. The system collapsed not from force, but from refusal to acknowledge its limits. Limits are unfashionable. Limits implied trade-offs. Trade-offs implies winners and losers. Elites hate admitting that policies have cost. So instead, they gaslight. They tell you crime isn't up. Housing pressure isn't real. Wage suppression, oh, that's a myth. And if you keep noticing patterns anyway, they tell you you're the problem. That strategy works for a while until it doesn't. Here's the part everyone dances around. When people feel ignored and are shamed for noticing reality, they don't become more compassionate, they become resentful. And resentful looks for an outlet. History is very clear about this. When legitimate concerns are suppressed, illegitimate solutions gain appeal. Not because people are evil, but because they want order restored. They want boundaries. They want someone to acknowledge the system isn't working. You don't prevent extremism by faking that everything is all fine. That's how you create it. And the irony is, the same people who claim to fear authoritarianism are actively laying the groundwork for it by accelerating demographic change, by refusing assimilation, by silencing anybody that disagrees with them, by turning every objection into a moral crime. That's not stability, that's building pressure. In Camp of the Saints, no one believes things will get as bad as they do until they already have. Everyone assumes the system will correct itself, that someone else will step in, that the rules will somehow save them. Rules don't save societies. People do. And people need shared identity to function as a group. A nation without a common language, a common culture, and a sense of obligation isn't a nation. It's a temporary arrangement. And a temporary arrangement don't inspire loyalty. This is where the conversation usually gets shut down, because once you admit assimilation matters, you admit culture matters. And once culture matters, the spreadsheet starts looking incomplete. GDP can go up while social trust collapse. Labor supply can increase while wages stagnate. Population can grow while society disintegrates. But those costs don't show up immediately. They lag, and elites love lagging indicators. It lets them cash out before the consequences arrive. The public, meanwhile, is told to be patient, to be kind, to accept discomfort indefinitely, to believe that questioning any of this makes them bad people. That moral framing is deliberate. It keeps the discussion frozen. Exactly like in Camp of the Saints, no one wants to be the villain, so nobody acts. Until someone does. When that happens, it's never the calm, reasonable correction everyone claims to want. It's abrupt, it's ugly, it's uncomfortable, because pressure was allowed to build instead of being released responsibly. If you actually want to avoid that outcome, you'd do the boring things. Enforce borders, slow the pace, require language and cultural integration, make citizenship mean something. But that would require admitting the system is flawed. That compassion without limits isn't compassion, that's negligence. And negligence dressed up as a virtue doesn't stay virtuous forever. You can shame people, you can censor them, you can pretend demographic reality isn't a conspiracy theory, but you can't override the human nature indefinitely. At some point, people demand cohesion. At some point, they demand order. And if no legitimate path exists, they will make an illegitimate one. That's not a threat, that's a pattern. Camp of the Saints isn't a blueprint, it's a warning about denial. about elites who mistake moral posturing for leadership, about systems that collapse because no one was willing to say enough while there was still time. Ignoring that lesson doesn't make you compassionate, it makes you irresponsible. And history isn't kind to irresponsibility.